Is there anybody
And at that moment, Colin Cowherd is talking about Barry Bonds and is this record tainted? And Hank Aaron's walking toward my car, and I thought, I better change the station.
I'll turn it off a little. I'm not going to want to talk to him about that.
Right.
What's up, Dad Hat Crew? Ed here. And on this episode, I give you guys Tim Hagerty. He is the Senior Manager, Broadcast and Media Relations for one of the most iconic brands out there in minor league baseball, the El Paso Chihuahuas. That's right. It is a beautiful brand. And Tim Hagerty, we go into his trajectory, right? How he got started in baseball, how he got started calling games and broadcasting and things like that. And then he also tells me one of the coolest stories about an iconic baseball player. So guys, without further ado, I'll give you the episode. All right, welcome back, guys, to yet another episode of the Dad Hat Chronicles. My name is Ed, and with me today, guys, I'm very excited because I have a person who has been doing broadcasting for a very long time. He is currently and I'm going to read this, from your bio here on the El Paso Chihuahuas bio. I have Tim Hagerty. He is the Senior Manager, Broadcast and Media Relations. That is an awesome title, my friend.
Kind of long, isn't it?
It's amazing, though. Mine is just as podcaster. So, how are you doing today, Tim?
Great. Thanks for inviting me. It's nice to meet you. And I love your hats.
Just a little bit. I only have a few. That's all.
I
Don't
see
worry.
the San Antonio Chanclas one.
Yes, sir. Yeah, look at you. Yeah, I do have some Chihuahuas. I've been meaning to get a couple more. The Diablos, which is an amazing logo. And then I also been wanting to get the Margaritas one, which is
cool.
The Copa brand as well. So, oh yeah. But Tim, let's just start by getting to know more about you, because something that I did, and I did it this morning, is I looked up your LinkedIn profile. And my friend, you've been doing broadcasting for just, a couple of years, not a whole lot, just a little bit of time. You started back and from what I see here, back in January of 2004, radio broadcaster for the Idaho Falls Chuckers.
Yes, and I grew up in Massachusetts. Well, I was born in New Hampshire, grew up in Massachusetts, went to college in Vermont and worked at some radio stations there. So I had never been anywhere near Idaho, but that made it extra exciting. My father and I packed up the car, drove from the Northeast across these massive Midwestern states, and settled in Idaho. And some friends at the time were thinking, Idaho?
Right.
To people in Vermont, that seems like a very random place, but to me, that's been one of the great gifts about this career, is getting to see different cities and different states that I probably wouldn't have gone to otherwise.
So, and then at that point, the Chuckers were an affiliated ball club, so they're not what they are now, which is the collegiate, collegiate wood bat or professional league. But how was that experience, right? Because you're going, like you say, you're going from all the way from the East Coast to, Idaho Falls. Weather's a little bit, kind of the same, but not really at the same time.
It was a great experience, I think, for a couple of reasons. For one thing, it was a 5-person front office. And to compare that to where I am now with El Paso, one of the most successful AAA teams, I think we have about 40 employees. So there's really a big difference. So when you're working for a rookie league team, leading up to that season, I was doing everything from ticket sales to one day on the weekend, we came in and put a fresh coat of paint on the ballpark. And I had very little painting experience, but somehow they let me do it. One time, the high school kid that worked as the mascot, Charlie the Chucker, he was sick, and we had a big gig at the hospital in Idaho Falls. So I put on the mascot suit. So I think looking back, that was a strength, because then when you have interviews with higher level teams, you're able to touch on things like that. And they think, okay, this guy was willing to dress up like a big chicken. He's probably a hard worker.
But it is so minor league that, you get to do not just, broadcast, which is what you were hired for, but by the way, if you didn't know, look at your title, look at the subtitles that you do pretty much everything else from, cleaning, the tarp and everything else, in between, as oh, and by the way, you still need to do your broadcast.
Yes, and I tried to look at that as a plus.
Yeah.
I get to learn these different things, but there's no doubt there's times throughout my career, um, even now, there's sometimes that at 7:05 you're a little bit more tired than you'd like to be. You're probably not producing your A game, but
Yeah.
I think that makes you part of the front office family when you're willing to do those things. But Idaho was a great experience. They were a Kansas City Royals affiliate at the time.
Hmm.
The big prospect on that team was Billy Butler, who went on to play a long time. And it's funny, the new book of 1001 minor league stories that I know we'll talk about, he contributed the forward to that book. He and I were occasionally in touch, taping interviews when needed. And one
That's
time he said to
awesome.
me, well, let me know if you ever need anything. And you got to be careful when you offer that because sometimes people actually call you on it.
Yeah.
So he told me this great story about a game that was delayed when he was playing third base because there was a snake on the field in
Oh
Casper,
my.
Wyoming. So I had this idea of hoping to get a big name major leaguer to contribute a story like that and use it as the book's forward.
Yeah.
And Billy, a major league all-star, that was great to have him involved. And to me, that's a great fun thing about talking to players. If we get a big name on injury rehab, get them talking about their minor league days. Because even though these guys are millionaires and they're all-stars and they're famous,
Yeah.
I find that their minor league games are still so fresh. They can still remember those cities and those hotels and those ballparks.
And the bus trips and all that fun
Right.
stuff that they have to do. So yeah, I mean, like, listen, you did a lot of you kind of stayed on the West Coast for once you got to Idaho Falls, because then you did Mobile Bay Bears, but you did Portland, and then the Tucson Padres, and now the AAA, the Chihuahuas, and you've been with the Chihuahuas from the very beginning, weren't you?
Yes, my wife and I moved here in the fall of 2013. The Chihuahuas' first season and the opening of this ballpark was 2014. So I was one of the first employees. And it's such a great organization. There's still about a dozen front office members that have been here since the very beginning, which to me, when you think about 10 years, I think that's a lot.
Yeah.
Most people in a lot of fields, I think, change jobs within a decade, but we still really have a core here.
Let me ask you, because obviously you were there from the beginning, and there was a lot of stories that came out when the team changed its name and all that fun stuff. Like, how from your point of view, right? Like, I want to get to know, like, how was that taken? What was your experience when you guys were going to be known as the Chihuahuas?
I'd say a mixed response because there were some wild team names already, but some
Mhm,
of the most wild hadn't taken place yet. The Chihuahuas were announced before the Akron Rubber Ducks and the New Orleans Baby Cakes and
mhm,
the Rocket City Trash Pandas.
mhm,
And I do think that the Chihuahuas' success maybe made that a little bit easier for those teams to develop those brands. And that's not to discredit the names before us that also did well, the Montgomery Biscuits, the Lansing Lugnuts.
mhm.
But the response, I would call it mixed. I was lucky enough to be one of the people on stage when that was announced. I was an MC for that. And it was fun to scroll through the online comments. There was some anger.
Yeah,
The
I
thing I
would guess.
noticed among the hundreds and hundreds of comments and phone calls, nobody ever said anything about the logos. I thought that was really telling. I
Yeah.
think the Chihuahuas and Brandios did a great job with the logos. Brad Taylor, the vice president and general manager of the Chihuahuas, brings up the point. They wanted to have a different hat that made it okay for a manly man to wear it. Somebody who didn't want to have a small dog on his cap. We have the great EP logo, and we have the baseball and crossbones logo.
That's true.
And then if you go to our team store, there's things for women, things for kids, things for all genders. I think the Chihuahuas have done well with that, where they've made it cool for everybody in their own way.
Yeah, and credit obviously to Brandios, right? Because they were able to create such a cool and um different logo, right? Like, they didn't want to put just like a regular Chihuahua, right? A small dog, whatever, but they made it in such a way that even if an adult like myself still wears a hat with the head on it, it's still cool. Like, people still recognize that. It's still to this day. We're in what, 2023 now.
Yeah, that's been really fun. I've seen the Chihuahuas logo in some very random places. I've walked through the airport in Des Moines, Iowa, and there's a guy wearing a Chihuahuas cap. I had a
That's
friend text
awesome.
me one time. He was in South Africa on a vacation and saw a guy wearing an El Paso Chihuahuas t-shirt. So I do think it's become one of those brands that even if you're not connected to El Paso, it's become a real fun brand in minor league baseball.
Hmm.
You mentioned the Mobile Bay Bears. When I was broadcasting in the Southern League, there were two logos in that league that I hope never ever get changed. I know one of them's in a different league now, but at the time,
Hmm.
and those are the Chattanooga Lookouts.
Hmm.
I'm sure you have their cap
I
somewhere.
do.
Just love that sea and the lookout eyes,
Yep.
and the Carolina Mudcats
And I
with the
have that one as
mudcat
well.
going through the sea. It made me think when I was a kid, I was growing up in Massachusetts and I knew those logos. And I think it's really cool if the Chihuahuas have or will become that.
Yeah, and you know what? With the Mudcats, because they're not too far from me, they're about 45 minutes because I'm here in North Carolina, right? And to be able to see that people are still wearing that, and people, it is still a popular logo, even though it's been around for quite a while, right? There has been some different reiterations of the actual team, but it's always been the Mudcats, which is pretty cool, right? Same with the lookouts, man. That's a beautiful logo. The red, the eyes, like you said, that really pops. Yeah, you cannot just change those. Those they have to stay.
Yeah, I agree. Someday, if some, you know, really smart person says, we're going to rebrand the Chattanooga Lookouts, I think that person should go to jail.
We'll go get fired right away. Bye.
Yeah.
See ya. I don't know what you're talking about because we're not changing. So there you go. But I want to go back a little bit, right? I want to get to know as to, what got you interested in broadcasting as a person, right? Because a lot of people have like, I've always wanted to go and work in minor leagues, so I just got my foot in the door. But there's other people that have been very purposeful about what they wanted to do from the very get-go. Now, was broadcasting one of those things for you? You were very purposeful about becoming a broadcaster from the very beginning?
I was. I was fortunate that my high school had the town cable access TV station in it,
Mhm.
and they had this opportunity for kids to host a show, to broadcast games, to do everything. And that really became such a passion for me when I was just 17. I can admit this now, but there was times where I would step away and skip a class, but I wasn't skipping class to go hang out with girls or to go cause trouble. I was going to go edit tape for our next show or to set up the equipment for our next basketball broadcast. Even as a high school kid, I think it was an obsession, to be
Mhm.
honest with you. I think I know that's kind of a negative word, but it was really all I was thinking about. So yeah, as soon as high school, I knew this is what I wanted to pursue. And I found a broadcast specific college, Lyndon State College in Vermont. They had a great program, radio, TV, that I was able to get on air the day I showed up. There are some big universities that have well-known broadcast programs,
Mhm.
Northwestern, Syracuse, um, and those deserve the credit for the alumni they've produced. But as I looked into schools like that, you were in the classroom and you weren't really on the air until you were a junior or a senior. I wanted a smaller place where I could be calling games, where I could be reading news reports, where I could be interviewing people the day I showed up.
Mhm.
And looking back, being in a really rural part of Vermont, that helped because I was able to get a part-time job at the radio station where they were actually paying me to do these things. Whereas if I was in a
Yeah.
bigger city, they wouldn't allow a 19-year-old kid to get $50 a game to go broadcast high school sports. So looking back, the fact that where I went to college was so isolated, I think helped me get more on-air time.
That's awesome because, and I said this on my last episode that I was on, but like I wanted to go into radio, but like it was going to go to like a radio, broadcasting school in when I was back in Cleveland. And at that point, I was like with my wife and all that. So it was not going to be able to be feasible for me. But I've always respected people who says like, yeah, I went straight for a broadcasting. It's like something fun and I wanted to do. And like you said, it's like you went to a small school and you were very purposeful about it, right? I was like you said, Northwestern. You're not going to get in, to broadcasting unless you did your own thing right away. It just it wouldn't have happened.
Yeah, and it kind of when I started broadcasting games in high school, what that brought out in me, it kind of makes me wonder how much of us really pick our careers or
Mhm.
sometimes something finds us.
Yeah.
Once that happened to me, it really didn't become a choice. I literally never considered anything else from
Okay.
age 17 to today, as far as a profession. I remember one time interviewing a manager, and there was another reporter nearby, and in this press conference situation, they said, "If it weren't for baseball, what do you think you'd be doing for a job?" And the manager looked at him and just said, "I have no idea. I literally have never thought about that."
And you're like the same. I was like, I really do not know. I probably would have
No.
been doing whatever it is in radio. That's what I was gonna do.
Yeah, something in broadcasting, whether it was sports play-by-play or news reporting,
Mhm.
something on air.
Let me ask you because this is something that is also very interesting in the way in which technology has progressed from the very from like when you were starting in your at college to now. Technology has come a long way, right? I mean, literally, you and me are having a conversation through the magic that is Zoom, right? Um, how have you been able to adjust from from early on to what it is now?
It's been an amazing change. I mean, I can remember when I was in Mobile, that's when online audio streaming really became prominent, where there was this website, sportsjuice.com.
I
And
remember that.
yeah, you'd log on, you click on a team name. Minor League Baseball has since taken over those audio opportunities. Um, but to think at that time, nobody was listening to the game on their phone. It was always
Mhm.
on a desktop. So that, to me, that was the first step, was around, let's see, I was in Portland maybe 2010 when people began to get Blackberries and smartphones, where they not only could listen online to a game in a different city, but they could listen wherever they were. They didn't have
Mhm.
to be in front of um, a regular computer or a laptop anymore. And then when I was in Tucson 2011 through 2013, that's really when the social media began bursting, where if a Tucson player hit an inside the park home run, not only can you put that on the Tucson Padres website, but you can put that on Twitter. And then when minor league baseball retweets that to, at the time, 60, 70,000 people, and you'd look at the views and you'd say, wow, 3,000 people, in addition to the broadcast that heard it live, 3,000 more people have heard that. And
Yeah,
since then, social media has just grown and grown. We're now, we've had some viral clips here in El Paso. Fernando Tatis Jr., for example, hitting 3 home runs in one game on rehab. Sports Center retweets that. And a few days later, I look at the views and it's like 2.8 million people. So
that's awesome.
yeah, it's awesome. I think it's also motivating that you got to be locked in, especially in those home games where it's your
Mhm.
voice connected to the video. I mean, we all have calls we like better than others. You
Yeah,
really hope a bad call doesn't happen when
right.
2 million people see it.
That's awesome though. And I'm sure sales kind of did ticked up a little bit once, ESPN retweeted that Tatis, hitting the 3 home runs. I'm like, here comes. We got more sales as well, which is a great thing. I'm all for supporting the minor league. So obviously 90+% of these hats are all minor league hats.
Yeah, absolutely. Some major leaguers move the needle more on rehabs than others. He absolutely did. Typically, a team's 4th of July game is their most well-attended game of the year.
Mhm.
El Paso's, a few days ago, as we taped this on July 7th, El Paso's July 4th game was the second most, and the only one that was more was one of the games that Fernando Tatis Jr. was here. Now, El Paso and
Yikes.
its sales staff already had a great crowd lined up. That would have
Yeah.
been a very big crowd. But as far as would it have eclipsed the July 4th crowd without Tatis? Maybe not.
Interesting, right? July 4th is the one that everybody attends. And, I love going to a July 4th game. This year we weren't able to do it, but there's something cool about it. You get to, you get to see all of the festivities, fireworks, and all that stuff. And there's something, not just major league, I'm talking minor league baseball. That's just, there's magic there when it comes to July 4th on that, in a minor league baseball ballpark.
I agree. Um, we have 150 games a year, but to me, when you ask me, where were you on the 4th of July in 2017? For the most part, I can picture that game where I was each year
Mhm.
on July 4th. El Paso this year, for the first time, was home on July 4th. We always had a big Independence Day celebration, but it was always on July 3rd.
Because you were on the
And
road.
exactly. Yeah. As you probably know, there's a minor league baseball rule that all teams must be home on the 3rd or the 4th.
Mhm.
So every team in the whole country in affiliated baseball in the minors is traveling either on the 3rd or the 4th. because of what you're saying. It's such a big crowd. You want to give every ballpark the opportunity to experience that. And it just so happened that Chihuahuas were always at home on July 3rd, which in some ways is just as good because most people don't have work on July 4th. So it almost becomes like a Friday night or a Saturday night
Mhm.
where you can also see the fireworks, but people, it's not a work night for them.
Yeah, and that's true. And heck yeah, absolutely. Enjoy it, right? Um, okay, so let's like you said, you've done a lot of work, besides being the broadcasting media relations. What has been one of your most um memorable times doing not just but broadcasting, working with the teams away from the booth? Like, what has been one of those things that you've been able to say is like, man, this is why I love minor league baseball.
Yeah, away from the booth, two things came to mind. One, working in Mobile, we were at Hank Aaron Stadium,
Oh, yeah.
and Hank Aaron grew up in Mobile. At that time, his mother still lived there. So Hank was sometimes around. We had a charity event. We had his birthday party one time. He came on the air with me during the 2005 Southern League All-Star
Oh, that
game.
just gave me chills.
It was incredible. Wait till you hear this story. Like it was fairly rare that he was there. I'd say once every couple of years, but he was around.
Mhm.
And one day he happens to be in the boardroom at Hank Aaron Stadium signing baseballs, getting ready for a charity event. I'm walking to my car and this couple pulls up and they're taking photos. And they said, "We're traveling through the Gulf. We're from Milwaukee. Oh, we are just so excited to be at Hank Aaron Stadium. My husband grew up watching Hank Aaron play for Milwaukee." Of course, Aaron played for Milwaukee with the Braves and the
Yeah.
Brewers, and
Yeah,
he ended
right.
his career with the Brewers. Um, and these people are just so excited just to be at Hank Aaron Stadium. So I didn't commit to anything, but I sort of tiptoed back into the office and I said to the general manager, I said, "Here's the situation. I hate to ask Hank Aaron anything, but could we ask him to walk out and take a picture?" And he said yes. So this guy who's already psyched to even be at Hank Aaron Stadium outwalks Hank Aaron himself, and he's just almost fell over. And Hank shook his hand, and they took a picture. And I mean, just imagine the timing. This guy's passing through along the Gulf, going
The
through
stars
Louisiana and
just
Mississippi.
align.
Exactly. And in that moment, Hank happened to be there for, his 1 or 2 days every couple of years.
Wow, that's amazing. That's awesome. Right,
Yeah,
and for you to actually, be able to just like, "Listen, I don't know if I can do this, but I'm gonna try." And for Hank Aaron to, really understands like, yeah, yeah, they came all the way from Milwaukee. It's like, "Yeah, I'm gonna be down there. Let's
you're right.
go."
He was a great person. He was so involved with Mobile. I saw that it wasn't just writing a check. He would go to Mobile and go to these charity events. He had the Hank Aaron Foundation, which helped underprivileged kids. And he set up branches in Milwaukee and Atlanta,
Mhm,
where he played, but also in Mobile. And I love when athletes do that, when they think not only about the places that made them famous, but also where they came from.
mhm. That's yeah, it's true. Because you see a lot of, a lot of the charity works nowadays. Usually, a lot of the players will do it in the place in which they are playing, or home. But like, just that's good to see and good to hear that obviously Hank Aaron was an amazing. So I mean, what are you gonna say? And you can't say anything bad about the man at all, ever.
No, no, he's I mean, just getting to interact with him and saw how he treated people. I don't know if I have a player I could put above him, both with what he did on the field and off the field.
Hmm.
I mean, I know he's wildly famous, but to me, he's also maybe the most underrated player of all time. If you check out that baseball reference page,
Hmm.
when people talk about who are the greatest hitters of all time and they talk about Ruth and then they bring up some more recent names, what about Hank Aaron? I mean, there's the famous stat you probably know. If you subtract all 755 of his home runs, he still has more than 3,000 hits.
Jesus. That's insanity. Like,
Yeah,
people, players don't get to 3,000 hits nowadays. It's hard. Like, what was the last one? Miguel Cabrera was the last one.
right.
It was just recently done. And how long has he been in the league?
And how hard it is to get 3,000. And then you think guys like Aaron who got well beyond 3,000.
Jeez. And and Clemente, who got exactly 3,000. Like, I mean,
Right.
that is super hard. Uh, you're hitting a baseball with a round bat and you're trying to get a hit. At the very least, get a hit. That's impressive. How was it though with him in the booth? I know I said off the booth, but how was that to have him? As you were broadcasting with him, having him on the booth.
That was an amazing day. The 2005 Southern League All-Star Game,
Mm-hmm.
and it's the busiest day all year for the Mobile Bay Bears staff. And the general manager comes up to me and says, "Hey, could you go pick up Hank Aaron?" And I laughed
What?
and I said, "Yeah, right." He goes, "No, seriously, to be honest with you, we're all so busy and I know you'd appreciate it." So I pull up in my beaten up Ford Taurus outside Hank Aaron's mother's house where Hank was staying. And Hank and his friend walk out. And you know what I remember about that was Colin Cowherd was on ESPN radio. And this is in the summer of 2005.
Yeah.
And Barry Bonds broke his record in August 2007. So this is really when this is a big story in baseball, when
Yeah.
Bonds is still hitting all these homers and he's nearing, mid
Aaron's.
700s. He's approaching Aaron's record. And at that moment, Colin Cowherd is talking about Barry Bonds and is this record tainted? And Hank Aaron's walking toward my car, and I thought I better change the station.
Just turn it off a little. I'm not gonna want to talk to him about that.
Right.
That's
But yeah, that was surreal driving with him, and it was like he was asking me more questions than vice versa. And I told him that every Southern League team that year had a player go right from AA to the major leagues, right over at AAA. And
yeah.
about an hour later, Hank was the guest speaker at the luncheon for the Southern League All-Star Game. And he says on stage, "In fact, every one of you has had a teammate go to the majors right from AA this year." I said, "Hey, Hank Aaron stole my material." Okay.
That's well, I'm gonna have to just repeat it again in the broadcast.
Right.
But okay, let's do it. I took
No, but
this
he
from
was
Aaron.
he just, as you might imagine, so classy, so distinguished, but also approachable. He'd call you by your name. Was just so impressed by the guy.
That's cool.
Nothing big league about him. He wouldn't think he's better than you. I don't know if you've ever felt this way, but someone that you didn't know well, I knew him. He would call me by my first name, but by no means were we friends. After I left Mobile, I'm not claiming that we stayed in touch or anything, but
Right.
but when he passed in January of 21, that was really affecting.
Yeah,
That really
absolutely.
really kind of affected my mood that day. Very, very sad.
It was a sad day. Indeed, it was, and I remember it. But like I've never met the man. Didn't see him play, right. Like I never had the chance, but like the fact that like he was such a a person that was beloved by everyone, and he transcended just baseball. It was all sports. Which is amazing. He was a great man for sure.
Sure
Okay,
was. And you think, just
go
one
ahead.
final thought. Reporters tried and tried and tried, and he would not say anything controversial. And you think about the nature and what was going on when he broke Ruth's record and these terrible letters he's getting. You think about what was going on when he broke the record, and then you think about the circumstances in which his record was broken. And for him not to stir the pot, not to start a fight. I mean, what a
And to make
classy,
a video
guy.
congratulate him,
Exactly. He congratulated him. Exactly right.
it speaks volumes of the person
Yep.
that he was.
I agree.
I agree. That's yeah, you're right. You're right. You are 100% right. Yeah, he never said anything bad. He never, like all the letters they received, and he still went out there and he still and this is in the deep South, right? In Atlanta when he was playing, and that's just yeah. I just gave you goosebumps
Yeah,
talking
me
about
too.
him. Hope you guys enjoyed part 1 of my conversation with Tim. Now make sure you guys are following him. Go on the team shop, okay? Get yourself a dad hat. Follow the team on Instagram, Twitter, wherever they are, okay? You guys will always find them. It is very simple. El Paso Chihuahuas. Make sure you guys are following me on Instagram, Twitter, or X. I don't know. I'm still confused about that one. I'm on Threads, my YouTube channel. Make sure you guys are following and give a shout out, okay? But guys, before I go, here is my dad joke of the episode, and here it is. Which dog breed is guaranteed to laugh at all your jokes? H-ha-ha. All right. I see myself out, guys. And until then, keep on grinding and always support the minor leagues. See ya.